Good afternoon, everybody. Isaac back here with you with a brand new episode of the Unorthodox Social Worker, where we do discuss all things social work from an unorthodox perspective. If you did want to know some further background information about myself as a social worker, please check out one of my first two videos where I do go into more detail about that. If you are a new viewer or if you are a returning viewer, do me a big favor, do it right now. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button. It really helps my channel get viewed by a broader audience. So off to the topic at hand today. If you've seen my video before, I did do a video about why, from my perspective, I thought there were so many homeless people in San Francisco. This is a follow-up video. If you didn't catch that one, you can go check that one on my channel. But this video is going to be what my plan would be to end or decrease homelessness in San Francisco. Keep in mind, this is coming from my perspective, someone who grew up in San Francisco, someone who has been working in social services for like a decade or so, probably longer than a decade. I'm not coming from a governmental point of view or a point of view of a homeless person. So my opinion will vary between different types of people based on my background. And keep in mind, when I'm talking about what my solutions would be, this is going to be under the constraints, our societal, our government, our economic constraints. So what's going on socially, politically, economically. I'm not looking to restructure or redesign our social views, political views, or economic practices. This would be the framework for decreasing or ending homelessness under our current societal, economic, and political norms. Okay, so keep in mind there's about 8,000 homeless people in San Francisco according to the last point in time count. Being someone who has participated in a point in time count, I can pretty much guarantee you that a lot of people are being missed in this point in time count. So I wouldn't be surprised if the amount of homeless people was easily over 10,000 as opposed to 8,000. So we do have a huge problem. So what's the first thing I think the city and county should do? We need to declare a state of emergency, and not a fake state of emergency, a real state of emergency. This needs to be number one priority of city and county of San Francisco, is addressing homelessness, and not only from the standpoint of homelessness, but as a state of emergency for the state of public health. I mean, I believe I read an article a few years back that scientists came to San Francisco and they took samples of the streets of San Francisco and found out San Francisco is more unsanitary than some third world countries. We are one of the richest cities in the world. I bet you if our city was considered a country by itself, we would still have one of the top economies in the world, even if we were considered a country. So the fact that our streets are more unsanitary than a third world country and we got all this money here is ridiculous. And we do need to, first off, declare a state of emergency. Next thing we need to do is build the adequate amount of shelter beds for the amount of homeless people. So if there's 8,000 homeless people, we need to build 8,000 homeless shelter beds. We're never going to get people off the street if we do not provide the same amount of shelter beds as there are homeless individuals. Now, as most of these homeless services are administered in this city and other places, most of the shelters and most of the homeless services, it gets funded by either the federal government, HUD, the state of California, the city and county, and maybe some private donations. So the money is usually coming from state entities, and then it's given to nonprofits, and nonprofits take on the work of homeless services, and then it's supposed to have oversight by the city and county. Now, what I think should happen, this may not be popular, but I think we need to cut out the nonprofits. Once this state of emergency is declared, we need to say bye-bye to the nonprofits, and the city and county needs to assume full responsibility of administering these homeless services. Now, why do I say that? Is there a lot of great nonprofits that do good work? Yes, there is a lot of great nonprofits that do good work. But there's also a lot of bad nonprofits. There's also a lot of corrupt nonprofits. And when we have this funding where nonprofits are competing just to get funded for the next year, and they're basically doing whatever they have to do to get their funding and reach their numbers instead of actually address the problems. So I believe we need to cut them out. Once they're cut out, there's going to be a more standardized, streamlined, or baseline standards for the program. When we're working with nonprofits, this nonprofit has a certain standard of services, this other nonprofit has a certain standard. Same with training. The training standards could be varied from one agency to the next. I've worked at some agencies where training is horrible, and there's no training. I've worked at agencies where training is very well. I believe that if we cut out the nonprofits and the city and county takes full charge of this, we will have a standard baseline for all training, program oversight, and program administration. Okay, the program is going to run a lot smoother, and it's going to be a lot more streamlined, a lot more efficient, which will provide better services and will also cost less money. Okay, and a lot of the top dogs at these nonprofits, they might be out of the job, but I can guarantee you that if the city opens up this whole vast homeless services and shelter system, they will be able to hire the workers, the good workers from the nonprofits, and they will end up working for the city. And usually when you work at a nonprofit, they don't pay you that much. So it's even going to be better for the social workers who work for homeless services, because they're probably going to end up getting paid more money by working for the city and county. So if they do this program, there's going to be all these vast array of jobs available for good, adequate social workers to apply to, receive proper training, have proper oversight, have standardized baselines, and we can provide good services. Okay, so again, might not be popular, but in my opinion, cut out the nonprofits. It's too much inconsistency between agency and agency. So what needs to happen for accessing homeless services? Like I said, we have so many nonprofits. If you're homeless in San Francisco or the Bay Area, there's a million different ways that you could access shelter services. You could call I believe the 211 hotline. You can go to a nonprofit and maybe they'll give you a referral, or maybe you can go to the city and they could give you a referral. We need to cut all this out. We need to choose one site in the city that is one centralized intake center that every homeless person will know about. We need to choose one building that every homeless person and even non-homeless person knows in the city of San Francisco. If you're homeless, this is where you go to get homeless services. So you're not going from this nonprofit to that nonprofit. Maybe they can help you. Maybe they can't. Maybe they'll refer you in an endless referral cycle. In this centralized one intake location, there will be no referral to this agency or that agency. You go to that centralized intake and you are intaked and assessed into the shelter system. I do believe there needs to be a certain level of steps before you graduate to housing. Okay, we are running usually in homeless service programs of the housing first model, which means they state we need to house people before we address any of their other concerns. I think it should be a little bit different. So I think there should be steps. So first off, after you're going to this one central intake that every homeless person knows about in the city, then they get assessed for health and mental health. Okay, if a homeless individual has health needs, health accommodations they need, whether it's physical or mental health, after they go into that centralized intake, they need to be sent to a shelter that just focuses on health and mental health. So instead of sending people to hospital shelter beds at the hospital, or putting them in a shelter that has some hospital people and some not hospital people, we need to essentially build a place that is a homeless shelter and a hospital, and then also a place that is a homeless shelter and a mental health facility. So we're not mixing different types of populations. If we target these certain issues, then we will provide better services. So I think that after the intake, health, mental health needs to be assessed. If there is any of those issues, then you will be sent to a shelter to accommodate those issues. If you don't have any of those issues, you can bypass that step. The next step of assessment, I think, should be after passing the health and mental health assessment, is an addiction assessment. If it is determined that someone has an addiction, whether it's addiction to drugs, addiction to gambling, addiction to buying prostitutes, whatever it is, if that issue is relevant with that individual, then they should be sent to a shelter that is everybody there is dealing with addiction, recovery, and treatment. Instead of housing, most of the shelters, it has different kind of people. You got some people with mental health, some people with addiction, some normal people. You know what I mean? If you are identified as having addictive behaviors that are detrimental to your stability, once you pass the health screening, you will be sent to a shelter that focuses on addiction and recovery. Once you have passed through that phase, I believe that anybody that wants an education should have the opportunity. So once the health, mental health, and addiction are dealt with, there should be shelters that are essentially universities, colleges. It's a place that would be a shelter that has classrooms in the shelter. If you want to get your GED, you can get your GED. If you want to continue your education into higher education, you should be given the opportunity to do that so you can broaden your opportunities, once you're out of the shelter system. Once you've got all the education you need, or, I believe that every homeless individual should be sent to another shelter that is based strictly off finances. So you'll be sent to this place, and this will essentially be some kind of other university that teaches you about finances. You will have classes on budgeting. You will have classes on what a bank account is. You will have classes on investing, putting money away for retirement, what an interest rate is, what a credit card is, how to fix your credit counseling. Every homeless individual should have a sufficient education on finances. This is something they don't even teach in the schools, which I think they do need to teach. I think financial literacy is something that's greatly lacking, not only in homeless services, but across the board when we talk about education. So again, I believe every homeless individual should have an education regarding finances. Once you get the finances under your belt, then I think you should be sent to a final shelter, which is in an employment / where you focus on employment and income. So if you are able to work, then we need to provide job training, job searching resources, counselors to help you apply for a job, build skills you need to apply for a job, have follow-up provided once you're in your job to ensure that you maintain your job. Okay, so a vast education and training program for employment. If someone is unfit to work, then this would be the area. Let's say you're disabled, then you'll be connected to Social Security. You'll be counseled on how to get your veterans benefits. If you have a pension, maybe you got some money that's owed to you. Who knows? If you can't work, this center will focus on getting you your alternate streams of income. So I do believe there does, in the shelter system, what typically happens now, we just have shelters and you have all types of people with different needs. Some are looking for jobs. Some are dealing with mental health issues. Some are dealing with addiction issues. Some want to further their education. And we group all these people in one facility when I think we should separate everyone out so they can be surrounded in that environment to focus on each barrier to their housing one step at a time and have a more holistic approach to that. Okay. Another thing I think needs to happen is there needs to be a national centralization of data. So if you didn't know, every county has a database where they keep record of all the homeless services. It's called HMIS. It stands for Homeless Management Information System. You can only see this database within the county you work. So if I work in San Francisco, I can only see information about anybody that access services in San Francisco. I can't see Alameda County, San Mateo County, or any counties or states in the nation. I do believe that the nation needs to make a national centralized database, okay, so that anybody, if someone ends up being homeless in another state, or they were homeless in another state, it's very, that information is just going to pop up on the database. We're being more efficient. We're not having people retell their stories, be re-traumatized. We will have a better picture and overall story about the client's situation by finding this information on what services they accessed across cities, counties, and states. And then, like, if states are doing things where, like, New York has a voucher where they'll pay for your housing out of state, it will be able to easily manage the flow of homeless individuals moving from state to state. A state could allot X amount of people they want to accept housing for, paid by other states and counties. And then they can monitor how many people are leaving their state. So I do think centralization of data on a national level is crucial. Okay, so that's what I think the shelter system should be like. Of course, we need to build the shelter beds, provide adequate services. The next thing we need to do is build enough housing. Now, currently, Mayor Breed has proposed, and I think it's going to go through about 900 units, and I think it's going to be built in Sunnydale, which is the housing projects in San Francisco. This is all good, great. You know, I commend the mayor for adding about 1,000 units of affordable housing, but we got over 8,000 homeless individuals, so we're barely making a dent in housing units. We still are far from the target of affordable housing being built for the amount of homeless people. And the fact that she's putting them in the projects way on the southern end of the city, dang near in Daly City, is kind of messed up, I think. It's kind of like you're just throwing these people out of sight, out of mind, hoping they will stay in the more dangerous, more out of the place areas in San Francisco so they won't be an eyesore. I do think housing doesn't have to just be built in the projects. It should be built everywhere. Okay, so again, like I said, we need to cut out the nonprofits. And what I think the city and county needs to do is the city and county needs to buy properties to build into affordable housing that can be offered to homeless individuals, and the rent should never exceed 1/3 of their income, okay? Because what's happening now is the vast majority of money that pays for housing vouchers, affordable housing vouchers, is funded by HUD, Housing and Urban Development. That is a federal agency. So HUD pays for Section 8, they pay for Shelter Plus Care, they pay for Veterans VASH program. And they actually, I believe, their budget this year has increased to $54 billion. So they have a $1.3 billion increase in funding. You know, despite what people say about the president that he's cutting funding, it actually looks like Congress approved an increase in the HUD budget. Now, I don't know the exact numbers about what I'm going to tell you, but I can tell you the vast majority, when people get a Section 8 voucher or any one of these housing vouchers, they're usually using it to rent a apartment from a private landlord. So what essentially is happening, the money is going from HUD, it goes to the housing voucher, and then it pays a private landlord, a private person. That is the vast majority. I believe it's 70 to 80%, something like that, of HUD money is not spent on buildings that are owned by the government. It's spent vast majority on private landlords. So if the city, I don't know why they haven't caught on to this, it's almost like they can pay themselves. They invest the money up front. They buy properties. You know, I did hear a stat that there is 5 vacant properties in San Francisco for every one homeless person. And then we add that for the, identifying sites that we can build more properties on. Cut the red tape on building these new properties. You can't say there's not enough space. If there's 5 vacant houses for every one homeless person, that's enough houses right there to house all the homeless individuals in the city and county. And now when the city and county buys up all these properties, land, builds new apartments, instead of all that HUD money going to a private landlord, all that HUD money is going to go to the city and county of San Francisco. So they're going to get paid by the feds. It's a win-win situation. I really don't know why the city hasn't realized this. Yes, it might cost a lot of money up front to invest in buying all these properties and building these properties up to proper codes, but over time, they're going to turn a profit because they're going to get free money from the federal government. And eventually, the amount of money in vouchers they're getting is going to be higher than the amount of money they invested in building and buying these properties. And they're actually going to start turning a profit. And then you can put some of that money, you're making money off homeless individuals and the federal government, essentially, while providing them services. And then once it turns a profit, you take some of that money and invest it back into homeless services program. Like, again, I don't know why the city hasn't realized this. It's a win-win situation, okay? So that goes into my theory. Let's cut out the nonprofits. You know, you got all these nonprofit housing developers. They're essentially private entities, and yet HUD is paying them all the $54 billion, okay? It would be much smarter for the city and county to be the recipient of that money. Then a property owner, because the property owner is going to invest the money in a new car or whatever, while the city and county can invest it back into the people of the city. Okay. Now, how are we going to pay for all of this? You're saying, oh, Isaac, there's like all these services we need to provide and blah, blah, blah. How is the city going to afford to pay for it? So I gave you one answer. The city buys up all the properties. They get paid by the federal government. They turn a profit. The city currently right now has an education surplus budget of $185 million, and the property tax revenue surplus is about $415 million. That's like about $600 million in budget surplus that we could use some of that for homeless services. You could also do a good old bond, a voter paid bond, you know, essentially have the city take out a loan and pay it back. We can also add small sales taxes and things of that nature. I feel like bonds and sales taxes would be unpopular because people think they're just throwing away the money. But also, the main thing I think we need to do is tax tech companies. Now, from my understanding, tech companies have flooded into San Francisco because they offered them lower taxes or no taxes. They've come in here, they've paid people exorbitant amounts of incomes to where the rent has raised exponentially. We need to start taxing these people. They don't look at them like they're like the traditional corporation, but these companies that are here, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, blah, 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 Uber, the list goes on, okay? We need to tax these people, and we need to tax them at least at the same rate as any other business would be taxed. It's ridiculous that we let these people in our city and we are not taxing them. They're using our city, but they don't want to pay taxes to help improve it. And then the employees complain that they have to deal with homelessness. The city, y'all need to start taxing big tech. I believe that taxing big tech alone would cover all the costs of paying for these homeless services and buying up properties to house low income people, on top of budget surpluses and buying the properties and eventually receiving a return on those properties. Okay, like it's just insanity. It's a state, you know, and a lot of it is politics. The money's there, but the city council and the mayor, whoever, they can't figure it out. Everybody's political about it. They're in their own feelings. They can't come to an agreement how they're going to pay for this. I mean, I'm in the Tenderloin right now. If you are any politician that's involved in the Tenderloin or any of these other affected areas, you should be the main one advocating for this funding. People need to stop going out to lunch, stop partying, all these politicians, especially here. This is just an example. The Tenderloin is a major crisis, housing crisis, public health crisis, drug selling crisis, and take notice, I'm not even suggesting that we should increase law enforcement to crack down on drug selling. But again, these politicians need to get out their feelings, come to an agreement, stop living in la la land. It is a public health crisis out here. Do something about it. Put your differences to the side. Stop worrying about getting reelected or what all of that. Do something about it. Get the money, make it happen. All right. And now the final thing I want to talk about this. Of course, we have people that are resistant to services, who don't want to take advantage of homeless services. Should we force people to take advantage of these homeless services? Say either you're going to get arrested or you have to access these services. I say no. Now, why do most people, homeless people, resist homeless services? In my experience, is because they had a crappy experience with homeless services in the past and felt the services were well below par. And so, based on their past experiences or what their current reputation is, they don't even want to deal with the homeless serviceness. It's too hard to navigate. The services aren't adequate, so forth and so on. The housing waiting list for these affordable housing is like years long. If we were to build the housing and have it all right there, people would be in housing immediately. It is my belief that if we totally tear this system down, cut out the nonprofits, make the government responsible for it, and we actually do build the housing, homeless individuals are going to see their other friends say, oh man, I got into housing like that, and I'm only paying 1/3 of my income. And they helped me get a job, and they helped me deal with my addiction, and it was no BS. Once the level and quality of services and quantity of shelter beds and affordable housing has greatly increased, then you're going to have a vast amount of people who are more likely to access services. Because if someone, formerly homeless individual tells one of their old friends they seen on the street, man, I went into the intake shelter, they helped me, and I was in housing like that, I can guarantee you a vast majority of homeless people will begin to access these services because they know it's not the runaround and a bunch of BS and all the bad experiences they've had in the past. Now, I do believe if people don't want to access these services, then they don't have to. But what needs to change is the city needs to build areas for people to live outdoors, and they need to provide adequate bathing facilities, places to use the bathroom, and places to dispose of trash. There's way too much trash, human waste, nowhere to go to the bathroom on the streets of San Francisco, and that's why it's so dirty. So after this infrastructure is built and there's still people that don't want the housing and the services, we need to build designated areas for people to go to that is sanitary and a dignified place to live. Again, it's going to have proper waste disposal, proper bathing facilities, proper bathroom facilities, and then some other services. If people want help finding jobs, then that person will be there too. The city is doing a little bit of this kind of stuff, but we need to greatly increase this, or else, it's going to be, the situation is going to continue. Okay? So, can we make all people access services? No. Do I think we should criminalize them because of it? No. The state, like if you watch my last video about jail, the state is already trying to decrease the amount of people in jail. So it would be stupid to just send a bunch of homeless people to jail when we're trying to decrease the population, okay? Especially if they're nonviolent and they really haven't committed any crime. But it's my belief that we could cut this thing down to 1,000 people if we did what I talked about. We really took it seriously. We restructured tore down this homeless services system, cut the nonprofits out, provided enough shelter beds, adequate shelter beds, accommodating shelters, programs that really help people get back on their feet and not just a bunch of runaround. And then lastly, build enough affordable housing. There's no reason that we live in like the richest city in the world and we have all these homeless people. It's like really crazy. It's really ridiculous. And we need to get it together. So hopefully some of the people that are really in charge of this may be watching and can take some of these ideas. But please let me know in the comments what y'all think about this plan, what could be better, and things of that nature. So that's my video for today, reporting live from my lunch break here in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. Isaac with the Unorthodox Social Worker. Be easy, and I will see y'all next time. Deuces.